Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this new edition of Book Bites on this slightly warmer Sunday evening. And we've just come through a session of the Josie Books and Blogs Festival, which was virtual for the first time this year, with a wonderful lineup of authors. And I hope that people caught some of the sessions last week. I have a very exciting author on tonight's show with some fabulous local and young adult writing. Born in the UK, Jann Weeratunga has made her home in Sri Lanka, Dubai, Bahrain for the last 16 years she's been in South Africa. Jann is very active and interactive at various of the local literary festivals. She does a lot of school-based workshops, encouraging readers and writing their own stories as well. Having written over 20 books across several genres, she's probably best known for her middle grade books, the Polly's Paralympic series, and the Toucan series. We'll be talking about the Polly's Paralympic series today because of the powerful way that she's engaged the narratives towards awareness creation in terms of disability and anti bullying. Polly is closest to her heart, she says, though, and through these books, she has recently earned 5 African awards. The Polly's Paralympic series deals with various diverse and inclusive projects and social issues. Um, as I said, they deal with bullying, throwing litter, as well as global warming and sportsmanship, and in some ways, even with conflict resolution. Um, I welcome Jann to the show, and I look forward to hearing exactly how it is that this Polly and the Pirates series came to be conceived in the first place. Welcome to the show, Jann.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So tell us about Polly and the Pirates series, because I mean I'm sitting here with 4 of them, and you
Mhm.
mentioned to me off air that you're busy with book 10. So I've
Correct.
had the pleasure of sinking my teeth into some of them. Um, and I've been fascinated by how you take the story of the parrot and work this very intelligent parrot um, around this idea of dealing with pirates, being a pirate, but also destigmatizing what it means to be a pirate. Tell us about some of that.
Okay, so the story basically starts off here in Africa. I mean, where else would you start off with parrots? And I deal right from the beginning with them, with Polly actually being stolen and sent overseas, and that actually happens in real life. And it's a good way to teach children, these things really do happen. So Polly gets sent to Scotland, which is cold and wet and horrible. And there she gets put into a pet shop. And she's very sad. And when you're very sad, you don't look your best, and all her feathers fall out, and that makes her look a little bit bedraggled and not very nice. And then some nasty children come along and they start teasing her. And this happens in real life as well. I mean, it happens not just obviously with animals, it happens with people. Children can be very unfair and very cruel, and they actually start teasing each other. So I sort of use Polly a little bit like a character. So Polly could be a child almost. And they start teasing her, and eventually she starts crying. She gets very upset. So one day in walks Captain Hake. Now, Captain Hake is on leave. Captain Hake, his base is in Scotland, in Tobermory, which is actually a town in Scotland. And he looks at this little bedraggled parrot who only has one eye, and his all her feathers have fallen out, and he decides his love at first sight. He has to have this parrot, so he buys her. After a bit of wheeling and dealing with the pet shop owner, because it's actually illegal to bring animals in from overseas to sell them, as we all know. And Polly then joins him on his ship. Well, obviously, he's a pirate captain. So that's how Polly becomes a pirate. And that's where we really start the story. So it starts, and I'll just show you this one, because these are my nice new covers. So it starts off with Polly becoming a pirate. And I talk about bullying in there because I think it's one of the things that I hate. I absolutely hate when you find children bullying other children. And so we've had the nasty boys, and one of the pages, I'm just going to briefly show it to you, although it'll probably come out backwards, but anyway, is that one. So I have these interactive pages at the end of each chapter. And there, the children, sorry, that's my dogs are joining in. There, the children can actually write in the book. But if a teacher uses it, I'm sure a teacher can just sort of photocopy a page. I don't mind people doing things like that. Obviously, as long as they don't photocopy the whole book. But it says things like, the nasty boys in the pet shop teased and bullied Polly. Do you know anyone who gets teased at school? And have you ever been teased or bullied? Draw what the bully looks like here. Now, this has actually been used in, to my knowledge, at least 4 schools in South Africa. And I've actually had parents and teachers come back to me and say, I actually discovered who the bully was. And
Okay.
we've now been able to go to the school and do something about this. So, and the children sometimes, children won't talk to a parent or a teacher sometimes, but they'll talk to Polly because they believe of Polly. She becomes real for them. She becomes their world.
And
And
I love how Polly is so interactive, and your methodology is so interactive, because you sometimes have children going for play therapy in order to ascertain, and unpack what's going on in the mind. And you've, in a way, used Polly. So not just schools, I think home schools and parents sitting at home would actually be able to use these books to help children of all ages get through some of the distress they might be experiencing, whether it's teasing and bullying, anything disempowering. But I also like that Polly destigmatizes, I said destigmatizes pirates, because pirates are always given this negative kind of feel in stories. But what you've done here is you've created this Olympic Games, this Paralympics. You've taken away the wooden pig and the hook hand and given them prosthetics.
yeah,
And you've actually made them this pirates of all nations in your books. I loved
yeah,
that,
yes.
because it also creates that feeling that they're included and inclusive
Mm.
in all of your, in all of, so there's conflict resolution, there's disability awareness. So, yeah, speak to us more about also the themes that you outlay in these different stories.
Well, basically, Paralympics, which, by the way, the real Paralympics are about to start on the 24th of August. And I just recommend everybody to watch those because some of those guys are absolute heroes. I mean, that they run, they jump, they do things that I can't do, and I'm fully bodied. But going back to my pirates, so yes, I wanted to modernize pirates. I wanted to get away from, as you say, the peg leg, the hook, although a couple of the characters do keep those because of who they are within the books, and modernize it. So we have the blades that they run with. We have the go faster wheelchairs that they use in the events. And it's a sort of modernization of the Paralympic Games, but for pirates. And obviously, if you think about the Olympics and the Paralympics, it's not just people from South Africa or from the UK or from America. It's people from all over the world that take part. So why not? Why not have pirates from all over the world? So I've created yellow turban pirates. I've created Zulu pirates. I've got Scottish pirates. I've got the Norwegian pirates. I've got Maoris with tattooed faces. So we've got pirates. I've got there's actually now 10 crews. And in book number, and I'm trying to think which number it is, book number 4, I actually bring in the girls. And at one point,
Yes,
the character, girls, what
girl
girls?
pirates.
Because you know what boys are like at that sort of age, 9, 10, 11. It's either, oh, girls, or, ooh, girls. So I
Right.
actually bring literally like that in my stories. And I talk about the girls. And the girls actually go on to beat the boys at quite a few things, because it's quite important that boys realize that girls are good at things as well. So there's this sort of balance between the genders, as well as looking at things like disability does not mean inability. That's one of my little catchphrases that I use in my books as well. Just because somebody's disabled does not mean they can do nothing for themselves. It does not mean that they can't take part in things. So they can. You just sometimes have to find a way to include them. So we need to be inclusive and actually include people in all walks of, in my opinion, in all walks of society. So I absolutely adore the Paralympic Games. And at the closing of the London 2012 Paralympics, there was actually Sir Philip Craven was talking, and he was actually in a wheelchair himself. He'd been an Olympian himself. and he was talking about a book, and the book happened to be Treasure Island, and he was talking about the mother and child reading this book. And the mother opened up the page and sort of said, who's this? And there was a photograph, a picture, and it was a pirate with one arm, one eye, one leg, sort of patch, hook, peg. And a friend of mine, I suddenly made this link, and I thought, hang on a minute, pirates, one eye, one arm, one leg, Paralympians,
Right.
not one eye, one arm, one leg. And I thought, why not pirates? And I looked up, our favorite Google, and nothing out there. And a friend said to me, why don't you write your own books? And I thought, nah, I'm not good enough to do anything like that, And then I thought, I don't know. And this particular person, they encouraged me so much, I actually did. And I came up with the first book, which was Polly's Paralympics. And then I sort of put it out there to a few people, and then a young 8-year-old came back and very wisely said, but who's, is Polly real? It's a bit like, is the tooth fairy real? You never burst a bubble for children. You tell them the truth. You don't necessarily tell them the whole truth. So I sort of said to him, well, how many, are there parrots out there? He said, oh, yes. I said, are there many? He said, yes, there's thousands. And I said, do you think any of them talk? Oh, yeah, no, some of them talk. And I said, well, there you go. Polly's real. So, Polly, then I sort of thought, well, I need to actually create Polly the character, because Polly actually dreams up the idea of the Paralympics for Captain Hake. So I sort of did the backstory, and the backstory was actually the first 2 books, which is how Polly became a pirate and Polly finds treasure. I changed the title because a lot of people couldn't say Polly, your neck and fly, to Polly finds treasure. And the treasure, treasure for everybody is different. And for pirates, treasure, we always think of gold and doubloons and all of this sort of thing. And I decided, no, we're going to have a different treasure. And their treasure was the prosthetics. And the prosthetics actually led them into their Paralympics, and they host their own Paralympic Games.
And also, there isn't this sort of fight for treasure that's usually the, sort of the story of pirates. And you have this kind of very healthy game played. So there isn't this, I think in many ways your methodology is about not just awareness for anti-bullying, but by creating this awareness, taking away the fear of the unknown for children as well, and so there isn't this sort of sense that you need to be you need to bully in order to reclaim your power. I particularly enjoyed that you brought in elements like the Loch Ness Monster and Leprechaun's Gold, which we've read about. And, I found that interesting because you brought that into this localized kind of stories. And so you've got interactive and fun kind of pages where children can get involved in the story, but you've also got these old myths that are weaved into the story that make it very, very interesting. Speak to us about some of that, because we don't see that in current literature. As much as you've modernized the pirate, you've also drawn on these old mythologies that, are very enjoyable for a new generation of readers. I think you've been muted.
Oh, okay. I've tried to link the books, the old and the new with the books. So even when it comes down to, let me just describe quickly the pirates. So for example, we've still got the classic galleon that you think of as a pirate ship with its sails and with its cannons. But they've also now got woven into their sails, they've got solar panels. So they can actually use solar panels. They've got purple-toothed telephones. They've got sonar. So it's sort of like a modern take on the old-fashioned and mixing the two. And right. So then, you wisely say, I actually I did Polly's Rainy Day Paralympics, because everybody thinks of things like Paralympics as sort of the hunt, fish, and shooting, types. And not all children are like that either. Some children are quieter. Some children, they don't really like sport, let's be honest. They want to just sit and play computer games all day. So some of the and I'm just going to run down very quickly just one or two of the chapters. So things like spelling bee competition. And
Okay.
I will go on to the leprechauns and Nessie, but the spelling bee, checkers, table football, things like tic-tac-toe or noughts and crosses, depending on how you want to talk about it. I've even invented a game called Polyopoly, which is obviously a little bit of a spin on Monopoly, but it's very much my own version. And climb the rigging and, walk the plank and climb the rigging, which is based on snakes and ladders. So those games are in there as well. Dominoes, tiddlywinks, other things. And then I've talked about the leprechauns, because obviously this particular one, which
Yes.
get the angle right. Here we go. That's actually based in Ireland. And Nessie obviously does not come from an island. Nessie comes from Scotland. So we start off with a sort of poof, poof of selfies being taken and photographs. And Nessie has just had it with all these photographs. She's had enough. So she's going to go on holiday. So she basically packs her bags. She leaves Loch Ness because there's a secret underground cave that takes her out to the sea. And she swims to Ireland. And on the way, she meets the pirates, and they sort of say, "Hello, Nessie," because they know her. And it's sort of, where are you off to? "No, I'm on holiday. I've had enough of all these humans." And so anyway, she ends up helping them actually run their Paralympic Games in Ireland. And I chose the sort of a little island just off the coast of Ireland a little bit. And of course, you have to have leprechauns. You cannot talk about Ireland and not have leprechauns. And I have Irish heritage myself. My mum's from Ireland, so this is very close to my heart as well. And of course, what do leprechauns like? Gold. What do pirates like? Gold. So it's a nice marriage. So I talk about the leprechauns and how they try and steal the pirates' gold, and how the pirates have to try and hide it. And there's all of this going on. And also in that book, at one point, for example, the pirates actually go and buy ice creams for everybody, and then in a little village, and then they chug on round into the little town because they want to get some errand jumpers and what have you for the winter when it gets cold. And somebody steals their parking bay, because there's very clearly a disabled parking bay, and they're in their little boat. They're in their little outboard motor boat, and this big flashy speedboat comes in with a guy, and there's nothing wrong with him, and he steals their parking bay, which means that Captain Hake, who did keep his peg leg, by the way, he's one of the characters that does, has difficulty getting out of the boat and onto the actual the mooring. And it sort of reflects a little bit like, when you see cars parked in parking bays and there's nothing wrong with those people, and they're
Right.
taking the boat from somebody who is disabled. So that's a little bit of a storyline that runs there as well. So I'm sort of trying to bring in old ideas, new ideas, a real mishmash into a modern take on things. So the leprechauns are in there, Nessie's in there. I mean, Nessie the Loch Ness Monster is just an absolute classic. People all say they've seen Nessie the Loch Ness Monster. Does she exist? Well, nobody's actually managed to get a proper. They're all blurry photographs if you actually go on and look at the real history. But it's a whole mythology that's built up, and it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful for kids because
Yes.
their minds can go mad with it. But then I also, in book 7, I actually come back to South Africa. We come back to Africa. We come back to South Africa because Polly had lost her friends in the first book, and she's looking for her friends. And we have references to that throughout a lot of the books. And then she finally comes back here, and she's looking for a forever home for her friends. Now, a forever home is a safe home. It's a place where rhinos won't be poached. And I talk about poaching because children need to understand this does happen. They don't
Yes.
need to understand all the detail, but they do need to understand it happens and it's wrong. It's a bad thing. And eventually, with the help of the pirates, and they end up at a game reserve called Tula Tula, which is actually you may have read it. There was a book by Lawrence Anthony called the Elephant Whisperer. He also wrote The
Oh,
Last
right.
Rhino. Yes, and his wife, Francois, who I'm good friends with, we actually met at one of the festivals. We met at the Kingsmead Festival. She wrote An Elephant in My Kitchen. So she gave me permission to use Tula Tula in my book. And she's actually written a foreword for that particular book as well. And so the pirates go on a safari. Now, pirates would never go on a safari. And they're
Yes.
looking at meerkats, and they've never seen a meerkat and a zebra. And what's that animal with a big long neck? It's a giraffe. And so it's also introducing children from outside South Africa into an African scenario and what it's like here in Africa. I talk about the taxis and that everybody knows what everybody's business on a taxi. And that's actually how they find out that the animals are on their way and they're traveling from Central Africa all the way down. And I actually have a separate book that describes, or two separate books, the journeys of the characters as they're actually coming down to Tula. So it's a
I
sort
find
of
it fascinating. I find it fascinating that you've taken these characters out of their comfort zone, and gone on this fact-finding mission through Africa on a safari. I mean, pirates, as you say, on a safari. So you're also introducing people who've never been into particular places, to these new characters, these new animals, and not just sort of preaching to say, this is what I'm teaching you, but actually that you're exploring with them. I think there's so many talking points through each of these books that parents and teachers and homeschoolers would be able to use as reference in such a fun way. So I do hope more people, pick up on these books as well. But I mean, and I was thinking back a little earlier before I talked to you about some of your other writing. Earlier, you said, when you were talking about your inspiration for the book, that you had a moment of doubt and thought that you weren't maybe ready or good enough. And that happens to us as writers. If you had not written the series, can you imagine how we would have missed out on such a magical experience through the Polly series? So thank you for not giving in, to the doubt. We often talk about the inner voice and not, wanting to give in when you think you've got a story inside of you. And I'm saying this also to future writers. Don't give in to those doubts, because until your story is written down, you don't know what it's worth. I mean, this is a case in point. Tell us also about the Toucan series, the other writing that's coming out from your pen, and more inspiration to look forward to. Please
three books.
unmute.
Here we go. Tukani's actually three books. They're sort of which way? There you go. They're sort of just up there behind me. They're basically how Tukani ends up in South Africa. They're all set in South Africa, by the way. They're all set in between Port Elizabeth and Durban. So very, very locally set, because I think, again, it's important for other people in other parts of the world to know about this part of the world.
Right.
And the first one, very, very briefly, is about Tukani coming here, how he gets his name, because Toucan, he's a Toucan, so he ends up being called Tukani. He ends up in Durban, and he makes a friend who is Umpo, the macaw, and basically he flies with them, and one of the other macaws basically says, I don't like your friend. And Umpo says, well, I don't care, he's my friend, and I'm going to stay with him. So he actually goes off with Tukani. And what I'm trying to say there is that sometimes our friends always aren't the same as us. And that actually doesn't matter. Your friend is your friend, and that's the most important thing. And eventually the rest of the flock all join up, and they sort of say, look, he was wrong with what he said. And, and you have a sort of happily ever after sort of scenario. Then there's another one based around stranger danger, why we don't talk to strangers, and how Tukani saves the day there. And another one where we're talking about throwing down litter. And that's a real, and each of these stories has a little song in it as well. And how we should throw litter, we put it in the bin. Then those are the series that are already written and in print. Currently, I'm working on two more. One is called the Yoganinis, and that's actually the only human series I have. All the others are based around birds, because Hetty the Hornbill, which is for very young children, we don't pinch, punch, push, that sort of thing. And then we have Farouk the Falcon. But the Yoganinis and Farouk the Falcon are actually set in the Middle East. And again, because I lived out there for a while, and I want people to understand other cultures. I mean, I've set Farouk with the Pan-Arab Games, and I've used the modern games as well as the old games. So the first book is based around equestrian things and the dhows, the sailing of the dhows, and where the dhows come. And you have to do a lot of research on these things. Hey, I fall down the rabbit hole and spend days researching, because kids will pick up. If you get it wrong, they will know. So you spend all this time, and I learn so much when I'm actually researching as well. So I find it fascinating. I love it. So Farouk is basically there's three books that will be in that series. There's the Pan African games as we understand it at the moment. There's the more the older games that are based around the Middle East, and then there's some that are based around the cultures, the foods, and what comes out of that side of things as well. And the Yoganinis, which, as I said, is the only sort of humans that I have books based on, are around children who do yoga and different places that they do yoga. But I also describe what an oasis is, and they go out to an oasis for one of their sessions. One boy walking past pokes fun, makes fun at them, but it ends up having to be in a class with them, and then there's the resolve of all of that. So that's sort of other series that I'm currently just sort of finishing up with the graphics, finishing up with writing. Those are coming out as well. So there's quite a lot coming out of the end of my pen at the moment. Yes.
Yeah, this sounds very exciting, really fantastic that you've continued this energy. And I think sometimes these stories just have an energy of their own and they kind of drag you along with them.
Mm.
Do you do your own illustrations, or do you work with a team of illustrators? And how does that work?
Okay, mixture of both. Or my covers are produced by a cover designer I have, who's Tammy Bradbury, and she did all the illustrations for Tukani. The ones for the Polly series are a bit more basic because really they're just, I'll show you. We're into chapter books. This is for your middle grade. This is your sort of 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds. And I'm very much a believer they should be using their own imagination by then. So
Okay.
the early ones and also the Yoganinis will be the same. They're designed to be colored. So children can actually color in. And the reason for that is kids love coloring in. So they'll color in, but when they maybe don't like reading, but parents can read to them. And then by the time they're sort of coming out of that phase, they can actually read the book for themselves. Then they go into the Polly series and the Farouk series, and they'll be very, very similar in that way. Not really many pictures, because as I say, your words should create, in my opinion, your words should create pictures. So that's basically how I work with those. So it's a bit of a mixture of both.
Jann, that's absolutely beautiful. Thank you for speaking to us about your process and your beautiful, especially the Poly and the Paralympic series and the host of other works that we'll look forward to. I've also taken the liberty of putting out that if schools or libraries or young readers can write to us, that we have a mini competition and they can stand a chance to win one set or one or two copies of the series. And
Absolutely.
so even if it's not directly right now on the show, we look forward to comments as people view the show over the next few days. And hopefully in a week or so, you can make a decision and we can have a wonderful new reader pick up a copy or two of these books. Thank you so much for giving us your time. If there's any advice you had to give to young writers wanting to write their own stories, come up with fresh ideas, what would your advice be?
Okay. I'm actually going to backtrack just one little bit. You said, and I made a comment about I didn't think I was good enough. And the reason I didn't think I was good enough was because my English teacher had told me I wasn't good enough. So don't listen to other people. If you
Right.
want to write, you write. Because the first person you actually write for is yourself. You write because you want to write. Then others may like to read or listen to your stories. You may read them. You may read them to other children. You may read them to other children in the playground. Maybe you like drawing as well, and you can do like a comic book. So you can mix your drawing as well as your writing. So just write. Don't let anybody put you off. Don't let anybody tell you you can't do it. And it doesn't matter if your spelling's not so brilliant and your grammar, you will learn that. It's something you will develop. And if you're an adult, likewise, if your spelling and grammar is not so good, it doesn't actually matter. There are programs out there that can help those things and help you improve how to write and your style of writing and the craft. So just write. Write poems, write little stories, write long stories, write comics. I don't care what you write, just write.
Absolutely perfect. Once again, thank you so much for your time. I wish you everything of the best. And I know that many people will be picking up these books and thoroughly enjoying them, scribbling into them, and taking more inspiration from them as well. And so there you have it. We just had online local author Jann Weeratunga with her beautiful Polly and Paralympic series. Please look out for copies of various of her books and write to us and tell us what it is that you think will really benefit your school or your school library. And perhaps you stand a chance to win a set of some of these books in the next few days. Leave us your comments, and that's it for now from Book Bites on Salam Media.